just want to make sure you understand what level of accuracy I've had historically. The lawyers don't like me to say this. They like to remind you that past success does not lead to future accuracy. What we've done here is take my projections for employment for West Michigan that I give in January and looked at how close I was the following January. Okay, so this is a 1 year out forecast. I subtract the two numbers. If it's 0, I'm exactly right. Okay, the two colored lines are the accuracy with which the U.S. government calculates the number of employed people. So if I'm between those two numbers, I'm statistically correct. So you can see the only time in January that I got it wrong for the year recently was in 2020. We were calling for a recession that year. We just were calling for COVID. So, by April, we got our numbers realigned, but it took until April. Okay, so the big picture this year, it's been the picture for the entire year. I want to make sure that you understand that all year long, the expectation for the year was pendulum coming back. Okay, so pendulum got pulled up for 3 reasons. We'll go through those 3 reasons because it's how those are weaned off, which will tell us when and how deep the recession will be. Notice I didn't say if we will have a recession. That pendulum is coming back. The big problem is that the further you pull this, the more it swings like this. And if you're old enough to have watched Spaceballs, or if you drive a Tesla, the economy went straight to plaid. It was going so fast that it had to pull back. There was no choice. So whether the Federal Reserve is pushing it by using interest rates, or whether we would see more inflation, it would be coming back. Okay? So I'm going to go through those 3 things, the 3 drivers that got us to plaid, and then talk about how fast we're seeing those wear off to get us there. So the 3 things that got us there, and there's 3 short-term things. The overlying thing is a labor thing. So we'll be seeing that in all of them. Is COVID, all right, which is still in play. Ukraine, all right, Ukraine, and labor force. So, all right. So COVID, I still only use one number to talk about COVID, and it's this one. Leave it to an economist to find the most morbid number that exists, number of excess deaths. So what people smarter than me do is calculate the number of people who are going to die every single week in the United States. Sounds like a great job, doesn't it? And they can do this with great level of accuracy because we know how bad Americans eat, we know how badly they drive, we know how old they are. So we're very good.
And how much they drink.
All right. So there's an excess death if more people die than what we were projecting. So this over here is a bad flu year. Okay. This is COVID. Right. I don't know they died of COVID. I just know more people died than we expected. But these peaks match COVID. So now, over there on the edge, we're still seeing excess deaths. We did all summer long. Just a little bit, about 5,000 a week. All right? When that goes away is when we start seeing the supply chain problems start to ease off, and you start to see those prices come back into line because of that. So we should be watching that because that going to 0 in the United States will lead to better supply chain issues in China and Asia and Europe. And that will free up our ability to get goods at a reasonable price. Okay? My watch is buzzing. It's not my wife. It's the fifth email texted political ad.
Perfect.
All right. So the other problem that COVID gave us was this one. All right. The blue line is the amount of income after taxes that people had. Okay. And that big jump up you see at the beginning is April of 2020. So we in the United States lost 15% of our jobs in 1 month and we had a record increase in disposable income. All right. Here in Michigan, it was even worse. We had the harshest shutdown in the entire United States. By far, we were by far the only other state that was even close to us was New York. So instead of a 15% drop of employment, we had a 33% drop in April of 2020. Okay? I'm not here to say whether that was the right decision or the wrong decision. I'm just saying from an economic perspective, we had a very deep hit. Okay?
Well, we wanted to be on top for something.
We achieved it.
What is interesting though, and I'll do this as an aside, what is interesting though, is that if you take our COVID surge numbers and you map it against Florida's, you can't tell which one's Florida and which one's Michigan.
Right.
It's really, really crazy. Okay, so this is that first set of money. This is the unemployment benefits that you all got to deal with, people not wanting to work because they were making more. This is December. This is March. During that entire time frame, they couldn't consume as much as they normally do because everything was closed. So they got more money and they spent less money. The result was the U.S. government dumped about $5.5 trillion into about a $2.5 trillion hole, and then wondered why people have lots of extra money. Okay, so that's one of the pieces there. To help you see this, the orange line here is the net worth of the bottom 50%. This is not Jeff Bezos. Okay, it's the bottom 50%. They had a 135% increase in their net worth between February of 2020 and July of this year.
Say that again.
They had a 135% increase in their net worth between February of 2020 and July 1st of this year.
And what's that attributed to?
Most of that is, a good chunk of that is government benefits. There is also that bottom 25% has seen the largest run up in wages. So it's a combination of those two things. Okay. In fact, that adds up to an additional $2.5 trillion in net worth.
And could one argue that because they're in the lower 50th percentile, they were already behind, so part of this is a catch up to living wages and so on.
So we know that during normal times, the net worth of the bottom 50% in a country like the United States hovers around 4 or 5%. Okay? It's the reason why every major religion in the world has a tithing level of around 10%. All right? By the time the church takes their cut out, there's about 5% that makes it to the poor people. Okay? So that's what you need to have a stable economic, social economic system. All right? You go back to the 1990s, we were running 4%. You go to 2010, it had dropped to 0.3%. Okay? We are today back to 3.5%. So some of it is that. Okay? Interestingly though, the hit's being taken by the 50th to the 90th percentile. So that's the group that started to now fall behind. Okay? It's disguised a little bit by the net worth of their houses. Okay, so this is that group, and you'll actually see that this number actually goes down. I didn't update my graph today, but it actually goes down. Where this one, the orange one, actually continues to shoot up. Okay, so you can see that here by these income level differences. So the blue is the lowest income group, and this is their percentage change year over year. And you can see it through time. And the yellow is your top 25% of the income earners. Okay? Now, part of all of what we've been seeing comes down to one word, and we've been blaming them for everything else. We can blame them for this: millennials. Okay?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Part of all of this wage changes that we can see, we can blame on millennials.
Oh. Okay, good.
All right? So I'm not a boomer, but if you are a boomer, this is another hit you can do. All right? So what do we know? Millennials were born between the early 1980s and the mid 1990s. So about the year 2000, they started to really enter the front end of the workforce. And for the next 15 years, there was lots and lots of them entering the workforce. They were a huge group of people, right? So huge that we still talk about it and make jokes, right? No one talks about my generation. I'm Generation X. Not enough of us. All right? Look at this. As we go through here, there's a little bobble here that happens because of the Great Recession. But if I actually took this back farther, you'd see this blue line stays below. So their wage growth rate stayed below the wage growth rate of everybody else. Then the millennials started to move up their workforce chart. And your entry-level workers were now Gen Z. Look at that wage level. Started to pick up. There weren't enough workers. We saw an increase in wages on the bottom side. And in fact, if we restrict this to just young workers, this last year, people between the ages of 18 and 24 had a 16% increase in their wage. Okay? A lot of this is being driven by that big wave of people we have. And we got used to that big wave. And now it's not there. Okay? Which makes all of your jobs harder. All right? But here's the bad news. Okay? Their incomes went up. Their net wealth went up. And it's now starting to go down. So when this makes it back to this red line, all of that spare stimulus, which is pushing the world along, is gone. And at the rate that that's disappearing, that disappears at about the beginning of next year. So sometime late this year, early next year, maybe into the second quarter, we would expect that that stimulus push that's been keeping us moving faster than we should will be gone. Okay? And what? All right? That's why this is what we're watching. And this is why, even though we've had just an insane run up in interest rates, you haven't seen consumption fade away yet. And it hasn't faded away because of this big increase in number. Right? So, of the 8 percentage points of inflation that are out there right now, about half of them are because of this excess wealth. We know it's a little bit more than half. And the reason we know that is because prices went up and people bought more stuff. If prices went up and people bought less stuff, then it would have been the supply shocks from COVID and everything. Because prices went up and people bought more stuff, it was an overstimulated, over-income. So this is the spot prices of natural gas from Ukraine. I don't have to show gasoline. You all saw that, right? We're all paying more for gasoline today. Most of that's worked its way through the system now, so the higher price that you're seeing today is actually because we don't have refinery capacity in the United States and because of some cutbacks in OPEC. It's not because of the Ukraine anymore. Because what ended up happening is that all of a sudden, India and China that didn't buy any Russian oil, all of a sudden were buying almost only Russian oil, which meant the people they used to buy it from now had to ship their oil to Europe. So what ended up happening is Russian oil started out going around the world this way, and now it's going around the world this way. And it took about 6 months for that supply chain to move. Okay, so gasoline, I'm not too worried about. Their oil is dropping off a little bit because they don't have parts to replace things, but it's not bad. Natural gas, though, is a big deal, and this will be a big problem going forward. And you're like, wait a minute, natural gas just dropped. Didn't I just hear that? Yeah. And in fact, it dropped a lot in Europe. It's because everything is full. All the storage is full, and winter hasn't started yet. So hold your breath. Okay. Natural gas is going to be more expensive going forward. All right, but look at this. And guess what? We were lucky. We were lucky because there was a fire in Texas. Fire in Texas. Yeah. We We had a fire in Freeport, Texas, at the largest LNG plant in the entire United States. 25% of our exports went out of that plant. All of a sudden, they couldn't export anything. And so instead of that natural gas going to Europe, where natural gas is 10 times more expensive, it had to stay in the United States, and it drove our prices down more than they would have been. Without that fire in Freeport, we would have been at $14 this summer, not 6. Okay. That plant comes back online at the end of this, at the end of the year, and that natural gas will now be going to Europe, where they can make a lot more money. Okay. Again, you need an economist to make an explosion be a good thing. Okay. So price went up, we started drilling more, but notice not as fast as we have in the past when prices went up. And notice natural gas didn't go up that fast. The reason for this is manifold, but 2 of the reasons. One is methane regulations. So now there's a concern about the cost structure and the viability of pumping natural gas because of methane that may escape into the air. And we have bankers now who don't want to lend to this type of activity because we all know corporations who have had to pay for pollution that they did 10 years ago that hurt people. There's now a belief structure that even if they aren't paying for it now, corporations will be paying for this carbon 20 or 30 years from now. And so now that risk is being put into the portfolios as banks look at things. All right? So we didn't see a big jump. And in fact, the majors didn't jump at all. A good chunk of this was actually small startups. And in case you didn't believe it, when the price went up, this is this year, this is last year. When the price went up, all of a sudden we started consuming less than last year. And when it went up a lot, we started consuming a lot less than last year, even though none of us could buy a new car because they just didn't exist. All right? So Americans changed their behavior very quickly to this price change. All right? So one of the things that we talk about is if you actually want to decrease Americans' consumption of gasoline, you should put out a gasoline tax, not use things like laws that say what size my car is going to be or how much gas it needs. Okay? We respond to it. Here's the second piece that I want to make sure we talk about, the ag. So here's another place where the Ukraine had outsized impact and will continue to have outsized impact. Even if Russia keeps its deal going, they're getting far less grain out of Ukraine. There were countries all across Africa that more than 50% of their tonnage of food came from Ukraine. Okay? So you this Christmas will see a lot more stuff on the TV begging you for money for people who are starving in Africa because the food isn't there. Okay? That drives up the prices all across the world, and it's going to be there. It drives up the price of natural gas. You need that. And it drives up the price of diesel fuel, because now we're shipping all of our diesel fuel to Europe because they're burning diesel to replace the natural gas that they can't get. And so if you ever drive by your gasoline store, look at the difference in the price between gas and diesel. And then remember, diesel is what delivers you the stuff you eat and purchase in the store. This, by the way, affects the price of the food you eat next year. So if you think food inflation is going to go away, you're wrong. Okay? No matter what the Federal Reserve does, there's not going to be enough food, and it's going to drive prices up. Okay? So, drivers of inflation. Okay? This blue line is compensation. Notice that while all the millennials were coming in, compensation trended below the orange line, which is prices consumers pay. And then, as we got past the point where those millennials are now no longer entering the workforce, and the boomers are leaving the workforce, being replaced by Generation Z, sorry. Look at this. Now compensation is running ahead of prices. Again, it's demographics. We were telling people in 2018, so if you came to one of my presentations in 2018, we would be telling you the 2020s would be the decade of labor, that you would see more unionization drives, that there would be more strikes, and that you would be paying more for labor. So that you should already be looking at it. We were saying that in 2018. Ukraine and COVID hadn't happened, all right? Demographics are very, very powerful, all right? So this is to tell you that they haven't wrung it out yet. So this blue line is the short run trend. The gray line is the long run trend. So if the blue is above gray, things are still going up. And so you can see there's still a lot of built-in tension to pull prices higher. Okay? And consumers are glummy as hell. We've never seen them this depressed. They wasn't this depressed in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh my gosh, are they depressed? Of course, social media was brand new in 08, 9, 10. They are glummy. Gloomy. Glummy? Gloomy.
Oh, yeah. Either.
But, no they aren't. Economists don't believe what people say, we believe what they do. And they're still spending more money. If they're actually this upset about the economy, they should be cutting back on their spending. And they aren't. In fact, it was just last month where the real spending dropped below zero. So we're now starting to see them buy less stuff. They're still spending more because it costs more, but they're buying less stuff. But it was just last month that we finally saw that. Okay? That's amazing. So don't believe what people say, believe what they do. So let me walk you through this really fast. Here's a nice little pinwheel to help you see all this. So this is how people spend money. So the pie pieces is the percentage of your income that the average American spends on each of these things. Okay? So what we see right now, this one here is food. So for food, year over year, it's up 11.2 percentage points. Okay? If we look at how fast it's been growing just recently, and we look at the drivers we see going forward for the next 3 months, we see that it's slowing down to about 5%. So that big increase starts to disappear over the course of the next few months. Okay? It'll take until after the anniversary of the Ukraine for it to completely disappear from the inflation numbers. But that's what we're seeing right now. Here, this is energy. Energy is running at 19.8% above last year. Okay? It's slowing down to near zero by the time we get to about February, March next year. All right? In fact, it's been negative for the last 4 months. So, because it's going back. Okay? So, what we're seeing is that fuel prices will change. What changes is different. Gasoline will go down, diesel will stay high. Electricity is the next one to get hit. So if you don't know anything about how electricity rates are set in Michigan, this spring there'll be a bunch of PCER reconciliations that they do, where they try and readjust their electricity costs to the costs that they actually had to spend. So that's when they will then try to adjust the rates to make up for the prices that happened this year. All right, so your electricity rates next summer are going to be much more painful, and your natural gas is going to stay painful for the foreseeable future. Okay, it's going to be less if we have a nice, dry, warm winter. So it's a warm winter will survive the natural gas side. The electricity rate will go up no matter what. Goods, we see that's been running at 6.6% year over year. We see that slowing down to close to zero. So the supply chain problems are working their way out. People are able to get the goods that they need. And for gosh sakes, they can't raise the price of cars anymore because no one can afford them. All right. The new electric Silverado is $120,000. And Grand Valley's going to have to increase my wage if I'm going to buy a car for $120,000. So. We know that, okay? So we see that slowing. But the other side of the graph is where we see things accelerating now, okay? So we see shelter is going to continue to accelerate into next year, all right? By the time I'll show you this, But if you bought a new house today, you would be paying in West Michigan approximately $700 more a month on your mortgage than you did if you had bought it last year at the same time. Okay, that's a big deal. And as a result, we see even bigger increases in rents. So those rental costs are going up. Okay, we're also seeing services go up. They were up 6.7% this year. They're right now trending at 9.5%, and we expect that they'll stay pretty strong in the first half of next year. And the reason that that's the case is a lot of these are those younger workers. It's the reason why even at expensive restaurants, I'm still having to scan a QR code. Okay. I'm paying a lot of money. Maybe somebody else can take my phone and scan the QR code for me. But that's there, and we'd expect that to happen. This is almost all wages here, and those wages haven't built their way into the price of a hamburger yet. Okay. So, what do we see here? If you take all this over here, this is speeding up, this is slowing down, and instead of having 8% inflation, what we're looking at next year is more on the order of 5% inflation. The Federal Reserve says 3%. If they actually drive it down to 3%, you're going to see some massive increases in interest rates pretty soon. Okay. So if you see those, you'll know that I'm wrong, and that you should be thinking about the interest rate things more.
You mean in order for them to drive it down faster, they're gonna have to increase faster, yeah.
Yeah. So you can see these interest rate changes here. They're averaged over a month, so they aren't as high as what they really are right now. And so what you can see here is this gap. This is your 30-year mortgage. This is your Fed funds rate. You notice this gap when things are stable is about 3 of these lines. So
So it's the bank margin.
what? Yeah.
That's the bank
Yeah,
margin.
the bank margin. So what we can see here is they've built in that increase that just happened, but they hadn't built in any more than the increase that just happened. We know that there is about another 0.5 percentage point this year. So we're looking at mortgage rates at the end of this year at between 7.5% and 8%. Okay. In other words, the 1990s.
Hey, I had a 13% mortgage in the early 90s.
There you go.
Right,
There you go.
right.
I had a 14% CD, so thank you for
Right,
that.
Yeah, where are those hidden by now?
They don't need to give them.
Right.
Think about this. I just told you that the poorest group has an extra $2.5 trillion in wealth. The next group has another $8 trillion in wealth. That's an extra $10 trillion in wealth. Does the bank have to give us higher interest rates for more money? So until those people bleed down how much they're spending, you won't bleed down their savings. You won't see higher interest rates because they give them to us. We already have it. It's so scary.
What was it last week? There was a 10-year that came out at 9.9% or something, and the Fed couldn't process the orders fast enough.
Yeah, those are I-bonds.
Yeah.
So I-bonds are really cool. I have one for my son's college. Great for college because they index to inflation. So the 9% one ran out at the end of that one. So that just gave you 9% for the next 6 months before it resets, 3 to 6 months. But it was replaced with a 6.7%.
Right.
So an I-bond, you have to pay it all back if you take it out in under a year. You have to give back all the interest if you take it in 5 years. So it's great for college funds.
Because the Fed system was unable to process all the orders that came in for it.
It's
There were
treasury.
so many.
Yeah.
Because it was, everybody knew.
And they knew it by Thursday.
Let me tell you, when an
they were processing
academic
it.
economist knows to buy an I-bond, you know everybody knows.
Yeah.
So, all right, so that's what was happening there. So this is just to show you that housing is slowing, automotive is slowing, layoffs are increasing. And here's one that I really like to look at. This is supply of new houses, all right? These are not pre-owned houses, these are new houses. Look at this. It went from here to here, from a 3-month supply to a 9-month supply in 6 months. Look at when we've been at 9 ends. 2007, 1992, 1982. All right, we're already seeing housing construction move into recession. Okay, so housing construction is there. Commercial construction isn't there yet because they have they were running on a 24-month lead time. But unfortunately for you, they use steel, not as much wood. So.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. So, so this shows you everything is slowing down. Okay. So, at the beginning of the year, we were calling for West Michigan employment growth from January to January to be between 2.6 and 3.2%. We're calling for that to continue. We called the beginning of the year was correct. Okay, right now. If you look September to December, we're up 2.9%. We think when we get to December, we'll actually be on the bottom part of this range as opposed to the top part. Okay? So sales growth, we were looking at the mid 2.5s on average. And right now we're in danger of it dropping below that, but we look right now, it still looks like we might get just within that number for West Michigan. Wage growth, we were calling for just short of 5% on average, about double that for entry-level workers. Okay, and currently we're still seeing on track for that. Right now we're starting to see a pickup in higher level wages. Everybody's like, why aren't we seeing it happen instantaneously? It's like hourly wages change instantaneously. Everybody else gets their wage change either on January 1st, July 1st, or October if you work for the government. So, you know, because most salary workers get theirs once a year, it doesn't all happen. Okay? So we're looking at that. You're going to start to see that entry-level wage growth slow, and you're going to see a faster acceleration in that mid-range now. So, okay, CPI inflation, we were calling for about 6.5%. Right now, we're still calling for 6.5%. Right now, it looks like we'll be near the top end of this range at the end of the year. Right? I have to really thank Kahila G'day for this. Kahila G'day is a macroeconomist who does Fed policy and prices, and she's far more brilliant than I am on that. So this was our call at the beginning of the year, and I think we'll be right. Okay. Interest rates is the one we got wrong. We were expecting about 125 basis points. Right now, it's looking like it will be between 400 and 450 basis points out of the year. So that was our bad call for the year so far. But it's always the thing that's the Federal Reserve gets to choose it. So we said things would noticeably slow down in the second half of the year. It's going to slow down, continue to slow down now faster, depending on what sector of the economy you're in. Services, not so much. Goods, a little faster. So what do you need to watch? You need to watch consumer spending. I never ask consumers, never care about consumers as an economist. Dangerous to say that, so we can report that and just get that little snippet on it. The reason I don't care is they're the last ones to know something's happening. Okay. I always know who's the last person to know they're going to get fired. The person who got fired. So this is, they don't normally know. But right now they have $10 trillion of excess wealth hanging out there. About $1.5 trillion in excess ready cash in savings that they have. Okay. Speed with which they spend or slow that down will affect everything. So watch that. Okay? Federal Reserve action. If you see it go above 450 basis points, things are going to slow down faster than I said. If you see it less than 450 points, you'll see more inflation than I said. Okay? Supply disruptions. Right now we see a slow, steady improvement in supply disruptions. You all are sitting in corporations where you can actually watch how fast they change. If they change fast in one direction or the other, that will change my prices accordingly. Okay? And the last one is so important, inflation expectations. I think I'm within 1 minute of Andy to say. Inflation expectations are so important, okay? Because that's what makes inflation pervasive. So how many of you have heard somebody say, I need to buy that now because it's going to go up in price? That's inflation expectations. And to the extent that people believe that, they pull purchasing forward, drive up demand, and actually cause the inflation that they expected to have happen. Right? Welcome to the 70s, where they actually sold cars by telling you, you better buy it now because we're raising the price next month. So inflation expectations is really important to be watching because the Federal Reserve will have to keep interest rates high until you stop hearing it. Right? There you go. High-speed run of where we see the economy.
After
So-
lunch digesting.
So we
That's
do see a
true, yeah.
recession. Right now, the recession that we see feels more like 2001 or 1992. All right, that's what we're seeing right now because there's so much net worth there to keep it from going too low. Okay? But if the Federal Reserve does what they say and tries to drive prices down to 2% in the next year, the risk of a 1982 style recession starts to increase very, very quickly. And we're now hearing more and more economists talk about the 82 scenario. And remember, the 82 scenario was exactly this, the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates to drive out inflation. So, there you go.
And Paul and I had this conversation, at least 6 months ago, where he said it's gonna be a 1990 or 1980s recession.
So, that's what we're seeing right now. Any questions? We had it all the way through. So,
That's
one
nice.
cool thing for West Michigan. One cool thing for West Michigan is West Michigan is not a net importer of labor, but Kent County is. Kent County is a net importer. And we have a very unique thing happening right now if there are changes in immigration policy. Because we've now, in the last 5 years, hit a level of Hispanics living in the communities here and in Ottawa County where there is a feeling of home for people from Central and South America. And this is an opportunity if immigration is figured out, because there are a lot of families that want to reunite, and a lot of them have houses in West Michigan. So I think that right now we have still a few hidden women out there to come back. But I think the real possibility, the really upside possibility for us is taking advantage of the Hispanic community as far.